to enjoy it. But I mean, there's no doubt that there's 100% intent to just completely reboot the whole thing, like
Hmm.
start it over and
It
do the
feels like it.
groundwork, that they didn't do it the first time.
Yeah.
They jumped the gun real early, and they have been
They
backtracking ever since.
would you
They
say
jumped
that
the
they jumped
gun.
the James
Yeah.
gun?
You could say so, yeah. That would be accurate.
Oh, okay. I'll talk about that later. All right.
Right.
Let's
Let's
switch.
move on
Yeah.
to
Um.
the movie that Steve
To another
said.
James,
Yeah, another James. Well,
Yeah.
I thought you said this was a James Cameron movie, but when you said Avatar, I went and I looked for the movie Tar, and I found it, and it's
Okay, the
directed by
Todd Fields,
Todd
yeah.
Field, and I expected there to be more blue cat people in it, frankly, but
No,
maybe
no mocap.
I just remembered it wrong. No, but yeah, Avatar. Maybe explain. I liked your thinking behind why we should rewatch this one, Steve. I mean, it is there's a new one coming out, but this is a movie that we've
Yeah.
probably mentioned over the years, but not really revisited. At least that was what my feeling was. I had really not watched this movie from the beginning to the end in 10 years or something like that. So
Yeah, easily. I mean, I don't think I've watched the movie outside of seeing it theatrically the weekend it opened in 2009.
mhm.
I haven't seen it since. And I mean, it kind of has a bit of a reputation like that, where, it's like, the biggest movie of all time, gross wise, even, you know, recently after Endgame came out, recapturing that top spot due to the re-release. But it's got this reputation for like being the largest movie or the highest grossing movie of all time to really have, or seemingly have very little like cultural impact, lasting at least cultural impact, where you see the remnants of the merchandise, the remnants of scenes from the movie, lines, quotable, like any kind of like lasting impact on the culture, like movies that have come and gone do in spades. Like I just feel like Avatar has always been something to me where I recall when I saw it, like, yeah, I liked it. I thought the visual stuff was really, really exciting and fun for the time. To think, 13 years ago, for what it was doing, it was pretty impressive, especially what it was doing at the time, the push 3D and all that good stuff. Um, and I say good stuff from their point of view. I'm not really a huge fan
Yeah.
of 3D, but I mean, I just think that it's really interesting to think about the time it's taken to make the sequel. And they've already, from listening to him recently, it seems like they've already got like the third one pretty much shot and half of the fourth one shot. And it's just, it does seem like an interesting time for, we always talk about IP and what Disney's doing right now and where Disney's at as a company. And this is a movie that at the end of a year right now, where there's really little coming out for months, could have really strong legs.
Oh yeah.
Could do the same thing that the one did 13 years ago to become the biggest movie of all time, because that movie didn't go away for like 3.5 months.
Right.
And it made more money weekend over weekend than the one prior. And it was just one of those kind of juggernauts. So it always stands out to me in conversations with people that I talk to that are friends of mine that are big movie buffs, and even just people that just see the big things. Avatar never comes up in a
Never.
conversation, whether it's like, what's your favorite movie, or what's like the best theatrical experience, or like top tens or things like that. It feels to me like it had a bubble in that 10-month period around it, like, in terms of Academy nomination, all that stuff. And then after that, it just went away. It just disappeared. And there's been this discussion over it over 13 years about 5, 6, 7 movies coming out.
Right.
And now here we are. We finally have one coming out. And I sit back and say, okay, I haven't watched it in 13 years. The biggest movie of all time. So yeah, let's all watch it together. That was the idea.
But by one of the big directors whose work
Sure.
regularly gets dragged out and talked about, and like Terminator 2, for instance, or Titanic have much bigger shadows with regards to the specific references. I wonder if it's because the achievement is such a technical achievement. I mean, it is unquestionably
That's true.
a technical achievement, though. I mean, you watch this movie, it is unquestionably they worked on getting that part right.
Yeah.
We've seen so much CGI since then that kind of drafts on the technology maybe developed for this movie and movies like it, but that is implemented in a much less careful way.
Right.
Much less careful way. So I think that there is something about maybe that makes it less of a conversation piece as time goes by, because you can say,
Right.
oh, wow, this movie kind of blew people's minds based on how it looked, but almost nothing else about it is on that level. You know what I mean?
Totally.
The visuals
Yep.
and the design and the pacing and even the staging of some of the action scenes is just immaculate, and your eyes pop out of your head. But the characters, the story, the dialogue, it feels very predictable, very rote. And I mean, it gets by on some originality. Some aspect of it feels fresh just because it isn't one of these other franchises that we've just finished talking about how fatigued we are by them. And something about James Cameron being a guy who's trying to make a real movie and not think of his movies as product, even though he's just, I mean, he's such a funny, pompous nerd about how his stuff is so different when it's really not, but it is different in that way, in that he's trying to push the whole medium forward in some strange way when he makes a movie. So I think that might be why, is that there's not much to say beyond, oh, wow, it looked really cool. That shot was really cool. There's not a whole lot to the story or the characters that sticks to your ribs. Right. Conversely, with some of these other properties that have characters that people love and actors that people love that don't necessarily try to do something so technically special. I mean, we've just been recently talking about how Star Wars has largely forgotten how to try to blow your mind with what it can show you the way it used to. And the Marvel movies have always had, a range of visual effects, sometimes just serviceable to get the story told. It's not about wowing you with what they can do. And James Cameron is always trying to do that. So, and that aspect of the movie still held up. I don't know what systems you guys watched it on. I know you have a pretty nice home system, Ronald. Did you feel like Avatar, was one of those that kind of lets you show off the home theater experience?
I have a very unique version of Avatar. As a group that I deal with online that kind of upscales and remasters things, like adds HDR to stuff. And I have a 4K copy of Avatar that's like pristine. Like I gotta show you guys one day when you come over. So same audio, 5.1, great. Now, one thing I will say is there's an argument that I've always disliked about the Avatar thing, is like that it's Pocahontas meets
Ferngully.
Ferngully. When
and Dances with Wolves.
Here's my counter argument. 50% of the IP that comes out is based on something that already came out already. So like it bothers me that like that's like, sure, I mean, you can pull that from anything. Like I could say that this is based on this is a like
what's
remake.
Actually original now.
You can make anything sound dumb if you want to by comparing it to something like that.
For sure. And that's always bothered me about Avatar. Now, full transparency, I literally watched Avatar like a week before you said it because I wanted to get prepared. And then I rewatched it again. And I have to tell you that Avatar is not nearly as bad as I thought it was in my head. Like when I saw it, I was like, this is an achievement, right? But then I kind of was like, why did it get lost in the zeitgeist? And I think some of it has to do with like where it was readily available. Like there are some movies that are always available everywhere. So like, if it was available on Netflix, I feel like more people would be able to say, hey, what the fuck happened to Avatar? Let me rewatch it. It's been a while. It was never on anything like that.
Right.
It was never on Hulu or anything. I never saw it on Hulu. Disney Plus picked it up, and that was like, it was very recent. Like it was within the last couple of years. So like it wasn't readily available on the streamer. So I feel like things live on through, their watchability, rewatchability. And some of that literally sometimes has to do with where it's available. And Avatar was not available. There were times during this 13 years that you speak of that I was literally trying to find it on just like a streaming thing. I know it would come on TNT. It would come on like TNT and TBS, but like streamers,
right?
It was lost. That is my shitty explanation for why it may have kind of disappeared from the conversation. Availability, right? But the movie itself is fun. It's a popcorn movie. It has a lot of cool messages about the way we treat the earth, and that stuff is kind of on the surface, but it had to be said. The fact that somebody like James Cameron was trying to say something like this 13 years ago, hey, don't fuck up the environment. Be kind to people. Don't mistreat the natives. Be kind to them. Maybe this whole thing about taking over environments and, adding something to society and giving people languages and giving people culture is bullshit. Right. The fact that he had that stance for like a $200 million movie is fucking crazy to me, or 100 million, whatever it was at the time. So overall, not a perfect movie, but it was fucking fun and beautiful. And it still gets me kind of like worked up when I think about when Jake Sully can first walk after not being able to walk, and he's like walking in an avatar body. Like, it's something really cool,
and he just like
that.
takes off running. Yeah,
takes off running.
Yeah, I mean that's a cool scene.
The way Sigourney Weaver kind of mothers, it becomes his like surrogate mother. Like, things I totally forgot about when I first saw the movie.
Also in that bucket, I totally forgot that Giovanni Ribisi was even in this movie.
Yes, I totally
Giovanni Ribisi, our subtlest thespian.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, he's always fun. I think that when it's such an odd thing, because I don't know if I disagree with anything you said, Ronald. I don't think I'm as rosy on it as you, but I kind of would want to say there's really nothing wrong with this movie. It just, and that message, it connects. It's just that, like, James Cameron, there's a secret about James Cameron. I think we've talked about this before. There's a secret about him that people don't really talk about. The dude is corny as fuck. He's corny. Like, when it's his script and his words and his screenplay, he's corny. He's not doing like the Spielberg thing of finding like a great playwright to go write a script for him or whatever. And maybe there's a reason, like maybe there's a down the middleness, there's a hit in the bullseye thing that James Cameron knows how to do that is sometimes not that exciting to me to think about or to even to watch. Right. But it's so accomplished and it is so carefully done. And I was again, having seen all these things where I don't want to just repeat what I just said, but I really did find myself thinking like, this is the perfect time for me to rewatch this movie, because we are sort of at the end of our rope with the familiarity of these sagas we've been watching, where the storytelling's not always on point. And there's one thing about these movies. I've got tickets to see Avatar: Way of Water on Sunday morning. There is a part of me that's like, I still don't know if I want 3 hours and 10 minutes of this in a theater. It sounds like it's crazy. And every review I've read has made it, and I haven't read a lot, but just like little passing references, it sounds like the same movie to me. It sounds like people are saying technically immaculate, beautiful visuals, beautiful imagination, clunky script, obvious characters, predictable story. But it's the same people that are giving it high marks for the spectacle. And I've seen plenty of critics, people always act like critics don't want to give a popcorn movie credit, but critics will say in an interview, in a review where they're talking about how predictable something is, they'll also talk about how they enjoyed every minute of it despite that, So I think this is what you kind of know what to expect from this. The one thing I'm excited to see is how it might expand the world and the creatures that we see. I think the real problem for me with the Avatar movies, and it will always be a problem, and it's just something I have to get over to watch these movies, is I just don't like the design of the Na'vi. I don't like to look at them. I don't like their facial design. I don't like
their stupid faces, John.
I hate to say that.
Stupid faces.
Someone out there listening has a face like a Na'vi, and they're saying
it's based on someone, and you just attack them.
Right. But there's just something like they need to be more alien or something for me, or just have the ears and there's something goofy. And if I look at their faces too long, I can't take them too seriously. All the other creature designs I think are really cool to look at. All the monsters and wildlife. Yeah. And like you said, Ronald, the way it's all connected, I think all that works for me. So I know I can get through it. Way of Water, I'm not going to be coming out of it. Likely, I'm not going to be coming out of it with hatred in my heart, but I might be tired. However, I don't know how. There's some part of me that's always going to be wowed when someone's putting that kind of imagery on the screen. And, like fantasy sci-fi novel cover or sci-fi calendars with paintings on every month, the idea of seeing that kind of stuff brought to life has always, for me, been the appeal of what James Cameron is doing here. So I think the eye candy's going to be on point, and it was on point in this. And you're right, Ronald. It is like the sincerity and the earnestness of what it's trying to do. It does win out over my problems kind of with the corniness. It does work. It's functional. It's just that by the time it gets to the end, just to say what Steve said, I'm not thinking of a particular character moment or a line that really resonates with me. I'm thinking about different scenes and different visuals. And the version I watched was actually the extended collector's edition, which is close to 3 hours long. And I think there's more Earth stuff at the beginning of that. I felt like, having not watched the movie in forever, I appreciated the additional scenes that gave me a little bit more color and a little bit more time with the characters. But I kind of watched it in shifts. I decided at a certain point, I'm going to treat this like it's 3 hours of a TV show. And so and it actually worked. Like where the breaks were, I was like, if Avatar had been a prestige television show, I might have enjoyed it more, because an hour and then some time to leave it and come back, it felt good. But no, I think, I don't know if I learned that much new about this movie, but I did confirm some of the positives that we've been talking about, that it does still pack a wallop visually. Even like a shot of a helicarrier, like not a helicarrier, but those whatever those ships are that have the horizontal helicopter blades on them,
Yeah.
or the one on each side, or whatever you call those ships. There's just a shot of one of those landing on a cliffside at one point, and it's just this beautiful shot where you can feel like the air quality, and you can, I don't know, and it's just like, okay, this is what James Cameron does well. He gets off on showing us that gear, and he gets off on showing you weird alien life.
Yeah.
And he does a great job with that stuff. So
He does.
It seems like there's like a balance in terms of like what he's done. I mean, they always say like don't count, like don't bet against him. He's always like,
you'd be a fool
always
to count him out.
Overcome the expectations, and he's like, his doubters have always like kind of been put to shame. But it's just like, I think if you look at his filmography, definitely some movies stand out more as having a better balance of like, the character stuff and the spectacle. Like all of his movies, really, there's a spectacle element to it. Whether it's what they did in Titanic in terms of the sets that were built, the tanks that were built, all that stuff, or Terminator 2, what they did with Arnold, and what they did with like, making a huge action sequel, or even Aliens. It's just like he's always about that scope and spectacle. And it just feels like maybe Avatar is just more, it's like, goes all the way in on the spectacle and maybe leaves some other stuff more to be desired, with some of the character and story that some of his other movies actually have a really good quality with, or have good depth to. And I think that's really always been the concern with Avatar. And I think it is really probably why what I said earlier, and we've kind of all touched on it, it's like, I think that's probably why it hasn't had the impact, on culture or the zeitgeist, whatever we're going to call it, in the years since, because I do think it has been so kind of promoted and marketed, and like what moment it had was that you had to see it in theaters. And and kind of when that moment passed because of the visual, the spectacle element, and you can watch in your nice home theater at home, but I don't think anybody was doing that as much, just because like it really did lean so heavily into the theatrical experience, and you need to be a part of this moment. Kind of like Endgame did. That's kind of what got it so high up there. Is like you don't want to miss this moment in theaters. And I think with Avatar, it was really the technical achievement that it was. And you really, in most cases, only really experienced that in the theater. So, I don't think it really kind of had the impact on home video or streaming, like Ronald was saying, that a lot of other movies do. And, kind of maintain that reputation or, their relevancy in years that pass. But yeah, I mean, the rewatch for me, I kind of came out feeling the same way. I feel like remembering the first time I saw it. I mean, I enjoy the movie. I mean, I just don't find it to be anything special as a movie to me beyond it just being a good time. It looks awesome, and I'm really kind of curious to see the sequel and kind of what they're able to do to push that visual element. I do hope there's more in terms of characters and story in this one that doesn't feel as familiar, and maybe it won't because they're kind of past that point of comparison to things like Pocahontas and Ferngully and Dance with whatever you want to pick. Because I do kind of feel like it does feel like all those movies. So maybe, they're in a space where they can kind of have more of an original story and go past that comparison. I hope so.
Yeah, me too.
But I don't know. It's a really fun movie to watch. And I watched it with my daughter. And, I think, there's a lot of wow moments in this movie. And for that, you can't take anything away from it. I mean, it really did kind of push the envelope in many ways for technology at that time, and it holds up pretty well. I think it still looks really good watching it on a nice home video setup, but it still kind of sits in that spot with me where like it's a cool popcorn movie. It's fun to watch. There isn't really anything crazy bad about it at all. Like it's really not anything I would knock down, but it just sits in that weird space where it's like this is a fun popcorn movie, but it's a visual achievement. It's a spectacle, and it earned that for sure. But I'm excited to see the new one. I mean, my anticipation has grown in the past few weeks to see the sequel. I'm very curious to see how it performs. It seems like internationally, it's probably going to do kind of crazy business. Domestically, I'm more curious to see how it does because the sequel kind of has that unique thing where it's still getting like a China release, which a lot of the Marvel movies don't anymore. A lot of movies in general from Hollywood don't anymore, but it managed to secure that. So, I'm sure it's going to do crazy business over there in Asia, China specifically. And I just see how high this movie goes, see what Jim Cameron's cooking this year. But yeah, Avatar was a good watch, and I'm glad I took the time to do that, and I appreciated you guys doing the same.
So, what do you guys think of the what's called the Pandora paradox, which is the famous philosophical paradox whereby I believe it's Colonel Quaritch, played by Stephen Lang, says that Pandora will, what does he say? Pandora will shit you out dead with zero warning. Isn't he warning you by saying that? And therefore, is it not true, or is it true? I don't know. It's a philosophical paradox that people have been talking about for 13 years now.
13 years, yeah, wow. It's deep, John. It's deep.
What do you think, Ronald? Do you think being shit out dead with a little warning is better, or do you think you'd prefer it to be a surprise?
I think I'd want it to be a surprise, honestly, because what is that going to do for me? But
how do you prep for that?
All the time.
Yeah. If being shit out alive was an option, I'd take it. But what if I'm in some kind of chewed up, half digested form? I don't think I would like that either. So
yeah. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's the reason philosophers have been debating it since 2009.